For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. Many of you have probably heard of the Law Code of Hammurabi, which is one of the most well-known documents from the ancient world. Hammurabi was one of the most successful kings of Babylon, who lived in the 18th century BCE. And although the code that bears his name, a set of 282 laws inscribed in stone, is not the earliest code of laws that has been so far found in the world, that honor currently goes to the Code of Ur-Nammu. It is the longest and best preserved, and probably the most influential law code of the ancient Near East. But there is a mystery concerning this set of laws. No one really knows for sure what the code was for. You might say, what are you talking about? There are laws. These were the rules enforced in that society. Were they? That is not as clear-cut as you may think. Intrigued? Well, stick with me as I share with you the enigma of the Code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi ushered in what we now call the Old Babylonian period in Mesopotamia's history, which marked the beginning of Babylon's political dominance over southern Mesopotamia for the next 1,500 years. He's remembered as an efficient administrator and a fair ruler. He portrayed himself as the favorite of the gods who was devoted to justice. In a record from the time, he is said to have, I quote, established justice in his land at the start of his reign, and later he dedicated a statue of himself as the King of Justice. And this theme is likewise seen in an image he put on top of his Code of Hammurabi stela. At the top, it was engraved with an image of Shamash, the god of justice, handing the laws to Hammurabi, and the following text makes it clear that these are laws of the gods, not just rules created by mortal men. He put the stela in a major temple. He probably had copies of it in other temples too, so that anyone that was seeking justice could consult it and understand the legal situation. The stela says, any person feeling wronged in a legal matter should go in front of the statue of me as King of Justice, and also have my inscribed stela read out to him so that he can hear my precious words and my stela can explain the case to him. Now, what's weird is that the code was written in this archaic script that even literate people of the time would have had some difficulty understanding. Now, presumably there were some scholars stationed in the temple that could read the stela to anyone who wanted it, because that's what the stela says, but it is unusual. The laws address things like business contracts, proper prices for goods, family law, criminal law. Every crime inscribed on the stela is followed by the necessary punishment, like this is what the perpetrator must suffer. And because it was this huge stela erected in public, I guess no one could claim ignorance of the law. But there has been this long-standing debate about what the nature of the code is and what its purpose is. Was it really intended to be this authoritative code of laws, as the name we give to it suggests? Well, if you talk to most scholars, they're going to tell you that the word code is kind of misleading. It's not really what we think of as a law code. First of all, it's not exhaustive. It's not arranged in logical fashion like you might see with Justinian's Institutes or Napoleon's Code Civil. And the legal documents from the time, and not the stela, but other legal documents, show that judges were not using the code as the basis for their decisions, even when they're judging cases that are mentioned in the code. Now, there's one possible exception to this rule. There's a citation in a contract from the city of Ur, and it says, the amount of wages for a hired worker is written on the stela. That's what it says. Therefore, in accordance with what they told you, do not withhold their wages, be it barley or silver. So it mentions a stela. But it doesn't say it's the Code of Hammurabi stela. Now it could be, it might be, but that's the only reference we have to it. Most of the other court cases, they just decide the case without consulting any stela. Just to give you an idea of how Mesopotamian courts worked, they functioned under a sort of common law, and it was based on just principles of justice, general principles, and the judges would just use their common sense to decide the case. Okay? They didn't really have this idea that you have to go by the book, whatever the book says, or in this case, the stela. And that's why we wonder about the Code of Hammurabi's purpose. On occasions, kings might get involved in the legal system. They might have to issue a special edict for a situation. Sometimes we see things like, the king fixes prices on some commodities, or he remits some debts. Or a king might have to decide a special case because there was no legal precedent for it. Or he might modify an earlier law. If this is the case, some have hypothesized that the code was just this list of special decisions made by the king, or a number of kings over time. And the text was a work of legal theory or jurisprudence rather than legislation. They say that Hammurabi's Law Code, and earlier law codes too, probably were compiled from these royal legal edicts, and they were studied by people in law. Judges, future judges might study them when learning legal theory or something like that. A compilation of kingly decisions. Now, it's a good idea, but then the question comes up, why would they have publicly put it in the temple if it was just to be studied by lawyers? Another hypothesis is that the code was used as royal propaganda. It's not a code of law, but a monument presenting Hammurabi as an exemplary king of justice. And so, the argument goes, the code was intended for a couple different audiences. First of all, it showed the people of Hammurabi's time that justice would ultimately prevail, and that you don't have to worry, the king is performing his duty to protect the weak and powerless in society. But the other audience would be future kings. It was sort of a guide for them. Look at what your past predecessors had decided. Also, because copies of the stela were placed in temples in several Babylonian cities, maybe it was meant to show the gods that Hammurabi was fulfilling his responsibilities to them by acting as their representative on earth. If this were true, the code is not serving any practical purpose in the Babylonian legal system, and it wouldn't have much of an effect on the day-to-day lives of regular people. Then again, it could have been used as propaganda, but maybe as a uniting force for Hammurabi's empire. When Hammurabi became the king, Rimsin of Larsa was ruling over a lot of southern Mesopotamia, and Shamshi-Adad was ruling over northern Mesopotamia. But over the next several years, he ended up superseding both of them, and he became the dominant power in both of those regions, creating this powerful empire that encompassed many diverse territories. So one idea is that he instituted his law code in order to ensure the people back home that despite the fact that he's bringing in all these new peoples into the empire, don't worry, okay? Everything's going to be stable and peaceful and orderly. He needs the consent of the governed if he's going to have a stable society, so he had to allay their fears. Don't worry, everyone's going to behave in my empire, and we will all live in peace under the law. But maybe there was another reason. This new social environment that he had created with this empire was multi-ethnic. So they needed a common value system to prevent fights between the various groups and social instability. Maybe Hammurabi used these laws to unite them. And he's telling them, I got these laws from the gods, all right? My rule is absolute. You will all follow these. Okay, these are going to bring us together. Whereas earlier law codes had set fines and other minor penalties for various crimes, Hammurabi's punishments are very severe. In his law, he has this idea of retributive justice. It's what we call lex talionis. Have you heard of that? It's defined by the concept of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And maybe this was necessary because he has this diverse population. They could get out of control. He has to bring down the hammer. Other scholars disagree. They say that the Code of Hammurabi was mainly used as an educational tool for training scribes. They say, oh, this and other law codes too were just academic tractates on law used to train the scribes who would one day become part of the legal profession. Now, this is different from the earlier one I mentioned because that was based on the idea that maybe these were actual king's decisions. But according to this view, the cases on the stela are completely hypothetical. They were not real cases that had ever come into a court of law before. They weren't even based on reality. That this stela was produced by the same scholars who made omen lists or astronomical text. They were just drawing from rhetoric of the past. They were creating exercises for advanced students. Which view do you think is correct? The answer isn't clear, and it's not likely to be simple. And in fact, we can raise the same questions about most legal formulations from ancient times because they don't match up neatly with our own laws in either vocabulary or principles. If you'd like to read the Code of Hammurabi, I will leave a link to a translation below the video. Maybe you can offer your own ideas about what it was used for. I'd love to read your comments. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you liked it a lot, please consider donating with a super thanks. And if you like what this channel is doing in general and you want to help keep it afloat, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/World of Antiquity. You might like my little e-booklet, Why Ancient History Matters. It's designed to persuade people that the subject is important, even in the modern world. You might also wish to use it to help spread the word. So feel free to share it with someone you know. It's free for anyone who wants it. I've left a link in the description box below the video for you to grab a copy. Catch you later.